Okay, so moving on to air pollution. Pollution is a broader term, right? It includes now CO2, NOx, the nitrous oxides that come in from fossil fuel burning, methane, and so on, ozone, of course, created from transportation largely as well. And we talked about the impacts on labor lost from heat waves, for example. So here, looking at global ranking of risk factors by total number of deaths from all causes for all ages and both sexes in just 2017. Okay, so it's not the point I will make is that air pollution is something specific, but as we saw, wildfires can affect air pollution. Wildfires can directly affect health as well as through air pollution in a remote place. So, and they can also cause water pollution, food pollution, and so on. So it's not always easy to separate them. So it's worth looking at the risk factors together just for some broader context. So here are air pollution related diseases, respiratory infections, TB, neoplasms, cardiovascular, chronic respiratory diseases like asthma, diabetes, and chronic kidney diseases. And there are other disorders like HIV, enteric infections, malaria, and so on. And there are digestive diseases, mental health disorders, etc. So you can track the color codes here by yourself, but the factors that are considered in this study from IHME, I have the references for all the figures I used. I put it in the last slide of this course. I should have put it on each slide, but when I downloaded the figures, I didn't do it carefully enough, but you can click on the links and you will see where they're coming from. So, dietary risks, high blood pressure. So, air pollution, for example, is found to affect chronic respiratory diseases, blood pressures, and even diabetes and brain damage. Mexico City, dogs were found to be affected negatively because of pollution. In India, we talk a lot about dogs attacking people. Is there a relation between pollutions and dog attacking people? Something to worry about, right? Tobacco, so that's not a climate-related thing. High fasting glaucoma, total air pollution, there that is. High body mass index and water safety and health and so on. Okay, occupational risks, other environmental factors, etc. So it is in this broad context that you want to consider the air pollution that's created by pretty much all human activities. Food production causes pollution. Our water is polluted because of everything we do, like agriculture and driving and deforestation and urbanization. Energy production obviously causes lots of pollution, right? So human activity causes pollution of the air, the water, and the food. Nonetheless, looking specifically at some of these things, power plants emit greenhouse gases, and then there are these complex reactions between particular matter, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxides, mercury, which causes neurological damage. All of these things together can cause cancer on this end and cardiac and respiratory diseases on this end. Again, there are disparities here as well because, as I said already a couple of times, power plants can easily be located in poor neighborhoods and wastelands where some people are considered not as important for whatever reason. Obviously has something to do with poverty. Nonetheless, looking at the health effects of pollution, we can now look at air pollution and water pollution and soil contamination and see that the human body is basically receiving carbon monoxide, particulate matter, ozone, suffering nerve damage from lead, headaches and fatigue, respiratory illness, cardiovascular illness, gastroenteritis, cancer risk, nausea, skin irritation, and so on. Okay, water pollution, we'll look at HABs, for example, bacteria, parasites, chemicals. Warm temperatures also favor growths of some microbes and pathogens in water. Extreme heat and extreme rainfall events then spread these pathogens more easily. So you can see the link there, right? Water gets warmer, more microbes. Rain increases, becomes more extreme and washes off all kinds of nutrients into the water, because extreme rainfall produces larger runoffs, doesn't soak as easily. That produces harmful algal blooms and pathogens. Sea level rise brings them into the groundwater. Wastewater treatment by human beings is also creating pollutions, and so on. Soil contamination, of course, pesticide use, livestock, industrial farming, and so on, can also affect all these diseases. So this is a broader pollution, but more specifically, you can link to climate via the general vulnerability of populations, and you can again see the global south here being affected seriously by climate factors. The next slide has some tables to show this, and carbon-based economies. Okay, so intense carbon-based economies, industrial activity here in China, for example, obviously has a high risk factor. Okay, and there are biomass burning, deforestation, and other activities here in Africa, and as well here in the hotspot. So you have to be careful what the contributing factors are, but the scale here is the red colors are acute, severe, high, moderate, and low. So the disparities are again clear. The emissions obviously come from industrialized continents and countries like Canada and Europe, but the global common, like the atmosphere, is affected. Of course, Africans contribute to their own land use change as well. Here are the number of deaths related to climate effects: diarrhea, heat and cold, hunger, malaria, vector-borne diseases, meningitis, environmental disasters, and carbon economies bring about air pollution, indoor smoke, occupational hazards, and skin cancer. So 2010, you can see the various numbers amounting to almost 500,000 deaths attributable to these climate and carbon pollution. By 2030, they are projected to go to almost 6 million. Okay, obviously this depends on the assumptions made about how much the warming will be and what the sources of energy will be, transportation, people movements, and other factors. But nonetheless, there is no scenario in which we will reduce these number of deaths. Okay, these are the overall costs. You have to always worry about the costs. So climate and carbon, losses in billions of public and private partnerships corrected to US dollars. Climate, losses of GDP, net losses, and the expected losses in 2030. Okay, from climate, from carbon, and the total. So the question becomes, when you look at the costs of pollution on GDP, is how much do you want to spend to mitigate the pollution from climate and carbon, right? If the cost is less, then obviously it's a no-brainer. But the difficulty, of course, is that you cannot always account for the cost or the benefits. For example, how do you account for the benefit of improved health? It's not always easy. You can look at labor lost, reduced livelihoods, this, that, and the other thing, but some things are easily measured, but some things are not. So those are called externalities. If you reduce water pollution, food pollution, air pollution, health improves, but the impact of health on GDP is not always so easy to measure. Okay, so we have to be careful about those sorts of things. Air pollution affects people throughout their lifetime. It's not like it's only once, right? Pregnancy, low birth weight. In children, you have asthma, slower development of lung function, mental development problems, more wheezing and coughs, start of atherosclerosis. You can look up what that means. In adults, you have asthma, coronary diseases, strokes, lung cancer, COPD, diabetes, and elderlies, of course, continue with those things. So pollution drags you down throughout your life, and you are combining that with extending lifespans, so they bring about disease like dementia. We don't know the relations between things like heart attack, heart failure, strokes, breast cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, and pollution. Those are externalities as well. Okay, so that's harder to capture as well. So that's kind of the brief run through the impacts of air pollution on health. Very broad topic. The number of deaths attributable to climate, additional deaths attributable to air pollution in China and India now every year is more than 1 million, for example. Okay, how do you put a number on that? What is the cost of a life lost? So those are not always easy questions, but it's good to be aware of the scope of these impacts.